to go. So good afternoon, everybody. With a quorum present, the Maricopa Regional Continuum of Care Board meeting is now called to order. A few housekeeping announcements. Please remember to mute when you are not speaking to create a positive experience for everyone. Members attending by phone only, please remember to press *6 to mute and unmute and *9 to raise your hand. A special welcome to those in the community and the Rank and Review Subcommittee who have joined the Zoom meeting today. We are very happy to have you on board with us today. The next item on the agenda is a call to the audience. Members of the public were given an opportunity to submit written comments relating to this meeting on azmag.gov/comment within 1 hour of the posted start time for the meeting. In addition, members of the public were given the opportunity to join the Zoom meeting either by requesting the link from MAG staff or by registering on the COC board meeting event page. If you are wishing to make a comment, please raise your hand in Zoom and you will be invited to unmute at that time. Public comments are limited to 3 minutes. If you are having any technical difficulties, please email Katie Gentry at kgentry@azmag.gov. And before I ask MAG staff if there were any comments received, I feel like maybe we missed checking in by roll call. Do we not need to do that today, team? Or is it later on in the agenda?
You have enough action items, it's okay.
I'm sorry, Katie?
Oh, Amy.
I feel like usually we do check it, a roll call to check who's here.
Madam Chair, it would be good to do that to
Okay.
Indicate that we do have quorum. Thank you for asking.
Great. I would just like to turn it over to Ms. Gentry then to call the roll, please.
Chair Balch.
Katie, are you talking? I'm not sure I can hear you.
Chair Balch.
Oh, I'm here. Present, thank you.
All right. Elizabeth DaCosta.
Here.
Eric Cole.
Here.
Marshall Franklin.
Here.
Todd Gary. Chris Hallett.
Here.
Joan Service will not be joining us today. Charles Sullivan will also not be joining us today. Jackie Taylor.
Here.
Thank you. We have a quorum.
Okay, thanks, Katie. I apologize for jumping the gun on that, everybody. So we're going to go back to call to the audience. So MAG staff, I'd like to ask if any comments were received or if anyone has joined the call to offer comments at this time.
Madam Chair, no comments were received and no one has raised their hand at this time to offer a comment prior to the meeting starting.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that. Then we'll move on to item number 3. So our next item is approval of the September 27th, 2021 meeting minutes. Does any member of the board have questions or comments on the minutes? I'm not seeing any hands. Are you, Katie? Is that a no?
No, I'm not.
Okay. All right, then can I please get a motion to approve the September 27th, 2021 Maricopa Regional Continuum of Care Board meeting minutes?
So moved.
Thank you, Chris. Can I get a second?
This is Marshall. I'll second.
Hi, Marshall. Thank you very much. So we have a first and a second. Is there any discussion? Okay, seeing and hearing none, I'll ask MAG staff to proceed with the roll call vote. Please indicate clearly your yay or your nay after your name is called, and I always vote for creativity.
Chair Balch.
Yes, ma'am.
Eric Cole.
Aye.
Elizabeth DaCosta.
Yay.
Marshall Franklin,
You said creativity, so I'll do Snoop Dogg again for Shizzle. How's that?
Perfect. I love it.
Chad Berry, Chris Hallett,
Yay.
Jackie Taylor.
We.
The motion passes.
Perfect. Thanks so much. I'm going to need you all to work on your creativity in between items here. All right. Let's see. We're going to move on to the next agenda item now. So we are looking at the approval of rank and review. So Julie Montoya, Human Services Planner at MAG, will provide an overview of the rank and review process and then introduce the rank and review subcommittee to present the ranked project priority and list for approval. And before I turn it over to you, Julie, I just want to say my heartfelt gratitude to all of you who have served on the rank and review process. I know that that is a huge commitment of your time during this very busy time to read all of those applications, to think about them thoroughly, to meet with your colleagues and do the ranking process. There's a lot, a very detailed score sheet. There are presentations. So I just want to say how much I very much appreciate your service and look forward to this presentation. So Julie.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman, members of the COC board. I second that. Thank you. I'm going to give you a brief rundown of the NOFO funding and rank and review process before I hand it over to the review and rank subcommittee for their presentation. It looks like Katie is putting up our presentation. So just 1 second. Okay, thank you, Katie. So this year, the Maricopa Regional COC is eligible to apply for approximately $37 million in funding to support housing and services for homeless households. The funding that COCs can apply for is divided into tiers, which you can see here, with projects prioritized in Tier 1 more likely to be funded than projects of lower priority that are placed in Tier 2. So in addition, available bonus funding this year is approximately $1.6 million, while available DV bonus funding is approximately $3.9 million. This year's annual renewal demand for our COC is a little over $32 million. Historically, the COC awards have preserved our ARD amount each year, and you'll hear from the rank and review subcommittee here in a bit, but from a strategic perspective, the review and rank panelists' recommendation took into consideration the history of HUD funding of the ARD. Next slide, please. Actually, we can go 2 slides. Yeah, one more. One more slide, please. I think you skipped one. There you go. Thank you. So DV bonus is a separate pot of funding entirely for new projects that serve people who are fleeing domestic violence, sexual assault, or human trafficking. They must also be able to demonstrate they will use trauma-informed, victim-centered approaches. Next slide, please. So 37 total projects submitted applications for funding this year, including 8 new projects and 29 renewals. In addition to these, 1 application withdrew before the review and rank process, and another application was an ineligible planning grant. Next slide, please. Prior to the review and rank subcommittee meetings, MAG staff reviewed all the project applications for technical corrections and also provided scorecard to the renewal applicants. Renewal applicants were given an opportunity to provide narrative explanations for discretionary points, and both renewal and new applicants were able to receive discretionary points allocated from the in-person interviews that were conducted with the review and rank subcommittee. The review and rank subcommittee reviewed all the applications and came to a consensus to craft the 3 funding options. So prior to the NOFO being released, MAG staff really did look to put together a review and rank panel that reflected a group of individuals that represented the COC through their diverse expertise and knowledge. we already said thank you, but I really do want to give huge props to this panel. They met for 4 straight days last week, in addition to reviewing all the applications prior to that. They interviewed each applicant, allocated interview points. They went over every single detail of the applications. They had countless deliberations with one another. They really did analyze every scoring element until they came to a consensus on all the funding options. It was a really long week, but they did not take it lightly, and I really want to thank them for committing their time to the Maricopa COC. The 6 members that are representing, if you can go one more slide, please. Thank you. So the 6 members you can see that are representing the Review and Rank Subcommittee this year are Jocelyn Wilkinson with the Arizona Department of Veteran Services, Matthew Kelly with Mercy Care, Nathan Smith with Phoenix Rescue Mission, Pam Mosley with the Department of Economic Security, Rachel Milne with Maricopa County, and Shantae Smith with Community Solutions. So now I'm going to hand it over to Matthew Kelly and Nathan Smith, who will be presenting the recommendations from the Review and Rank Subcommittee. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, everybody. So I know Julie just kind of said everything I wanted to say, but I really do want to give everybody credit. I think that I had a great learning experience with this committee. It was a lot of work, but I think we all spent a lot of time really kind of thinking through our responses and ensuring that in our scoring, we were being consistent across all programs and being super thoughtful. And I think there was a lot of conversation that occurred throughout this process that really made me feel like we were making the best decisions based upon our knowledge, but also I think for the community as we move forward. So quickly go through this. So based on the review and ranking principles, the subcommittee adhered to the traditional scoring process. There are a number of projects that were ranked on the list, but not reviewed or scored by the panel. Those projects include renewal projects that have been operating for less than 1 year, and then also renewal projects for HMIS and coordinated entry. New HMIS and coordinated entry were reviewed and were ranked by the panel, but did not receive a score. That means there was a lot of robust conversation with regards to those particular programs. All the projects were reviewed and scored by the panel based upon the COC scoring criteria. Go to the next one. So what you all will probably be receiving is 3 different options with regards to this. So option A, B, and C. Basically, option A is the ranking based upon the scorecard plus the interview. Option B is the ranking based on A plus the discretionary points. And as you'll see between option A and B, they're almost exactly the same. The order didn't necessarily change a whole lot with regards to that when you look at the breakdown. And option C was the ranking based upon option B plus board priorities and system needs. So in this third option, we did definitely move a number of the existing programs or renewals to the tier 1 in an effort to honor the board priority. In addition to that, we also made one recommendation for a program that was actually also meeting the healthcare priority. And then there was also one recommendation for a DV bonus. And then 150 beds that were new were below in the tier 2.
Yeah, so as you can see there with options A and B, those, as Matthew just mentioned, were really based on the score plus the interview score and the discretionary points. The place where we really exercised our discretion in that was when ranking the HMIS and coordinated entry applications, which we wanted to make sure were represented in either tier 1 or tier 2, depending on which one it was. But then in option C, which is the one that we're recommending to the board, the first thing that we wanted to do was make sure to prioritize all of the renewal applications and the HMIS expansion in tier 1. In other words, we wanted to make sure that of the existing stock of beds that we currently have in our community, we weren't losing any of them. And so as you will know, those applications that find themselves in tier 1 are very, very likely to get funded, considering that year over year, our annual renewal demand has been met. The tier 2, we dropped into that tier permanent supportive housing expansion that meets the criteria for the healthcare partnership. So we wanted to make sure that was there. And we put the 2 coordinated entry expansions in tier 2 as well, just to make sure that from an infrastructure standpoint, we have the resources that are needed to meet the additional demand that is created by the extra beds that are here available. Now, we did find as we were reviewing the applications that it would be a good idea for the board to consider implementing a monitoring and technical assistance component to renewal projects. As you'll see on the next slide, we found that there were a couple of areas where some really important projects were not performing quite as well as they could have, and that with potentially some monitoring throughout the year or technical assistance throughout the year could have done a little better in those areas. Next slide. And so with option C, the one that we're recommending, that obviously, like I said, is the one that we're recommending to the board. There were 3 projects that were just not funded at all due to application inconsistencies. And this is a place where the board may consider providing that monitoring throughout the year. But in the area of budget, there were some projects where the budgets just simply didn't make sense given the nature of the scope of the project. Implementation timelines weren't always completely realistic or would have some things missing. Performance outcomes and understanding client needs were a couple of areas that we found projects were scoring less, and potentially with some technical assistance could have done a little better in those areas. So go to the next slide. So why do we choose option C? Again, just sort of rehashing, the number one most important thing is that it preserves the greatest number of existing renewal beds. Again, as important as it is, we heard this in all of our interviews, we read this in all of our materials, and I think generally we know this, that a big need in our community is beds. And so it's important to not lose what we already have, to not defund what we already have. And just knowing this from years past, plus what we understand from just the current time, that really does meet the board's priorities, which is to make sure that we've got enough beds, but also to understand and recognize the importance of infrastructure as we continue to grow, as the need in our community grows, and as our response becomes more sophisticated. It is really important that we support projects like Solari and the HMIS expansion, so that as our community grows, they can grow with it. Those infrastructure enhancements are really important. Now, as far as the DV bonus project, you'll see that sits right there on the line of tier 2. The reason that it's on tier 2, at the line of tier 2, is because there is a high likelihood, though no guarantee, so a bit of a gamble, that the DV bonus project will be funded. And so we wanted to make sure that we could get all of the other ones that weren't going to rely on a bonus like that has a high probability funded in tier 1 or potentially funded in tier 2. And then we have the DV bonus right there on straddling the end there of tier 2, with the hopes that it will get funded because there's just that high likelihood that the DV bonus project will get funded. So our recommendation to the board then is option C for all those reasons. And if there are any other questions, we can take those now.
This is Tad. One, I wanted to thank all of you guys for all the work on this, because I know this is by no means an easy task and pretty complex, and definitely appreciate the recommendations and how you guys have presented this. It's especially as a board member that might not be as connected to the day-to-day, it's extremely helpful to have things presented in this way. So really great job with that. My question is, one of the recommendations you had was the technical assistance aspect, which I think has been done in the past to some extent. But I'm just wondering, is there a resource that's probably an added resource demand to MAG or others? And so, is there a need for added resources in order to do that, or are the staff available now to make that recommendation happen? I'm just curious kind of what that might look like.
Great question. I think I'll defer. We talked about that quite a bit. I'll defer to MAG staff on that one. So Julie, do you want to take that?
Yeah, sure. So that's a great question, Tad. I think in the last year, we've added some additional staff to the homeless services team. And I think in the past, there's been some capacity issues. So I feel like this is more, guaranteed to be provided moving forward is the monitoring and, technical assistance to our COC funded providers. I don't know, Nikki, if you want to add anything to that.
No, I totally agree. I think now that we have staff available to meet the needs, we definitely, that's part of our plan moving forward.
And I'll just throw on there that I think the Solari expansion can really help with that. Just listening to their presentation, one of the things that they really want to bring to the table is some business intelligence tools that I think will make the ongoing monitoring of performance a whole lot cleaner and a lot easier. So, if you use your systems the right way, you don't have to depend as much on humans. And so then their interpretation process is a whole lot easier. So I think that's, again, part of what we're talking about when we say we really want to support the infrastructure projects, because it will make it a lot easier to do that kind of monitoring.
Thanks, Tad, and thanks, Nate, and thanks, Julie and Matthew. Members of the board, are there additional questions? I know, especially if this is your first time, this is a complicated matter, and you might be looking at the options in the materials that we were sent and have more questions. So this is the right time to ask them.
Madam Chair, Jackie Taylor has her hand up.
Thank you, Jackie, please.
Hi, by the way, my compliments and just great thanks to all of you that participated in this process. I know what a laborious task it is, and I really appreciate, as a provider, the recommendation for technical assistance, program evaluation. My only caveat to that is, whenever there's a program monitoring, it's a lot of work on behalf of the provider. And if we decide to do that as a continuum, which I wholeheartedly support, there's got to be a commitment to provide the feedback after the monitoring is done. That's the only way that changes can be made and that an agency can learn from the monitoring. Thanks.
Thank you, Jackie. Appreciate that very much. Marshall.
Yeah, so thank you. Yes, I want to echo what everyone said. Thank you to the Review and Rank Subcommittee. I know how much work that is, and time and energy and effort that you spend over and above what you do day to day. So really appreciate it. My only two questions are, and some of it is probably just not having a level of understanding or knowledge about the process. And then the second one, let me ask the second one, my second question first. So for the 37 new beds under option C, do we know if those are located throughout the county, or are they centralized in any one particular area? Just wondering. I don't know if anyone can answer that question.
I am studying the chart, Marshall, to try to answer that, but if staff has a quicker answer, I'd appreciate it.
In my recollection, this is a scattered site program, if I remember correctly.
So I'm going to make sure I'm understanding. So when we say 37 new beds and you say scattered, Matthew, you mean we're presuming they're scattered throughout the county, the region?
Right. They would assist the member in identifying where they would want to live within the community.
Okay, perfect. Okay, all right. That'll just be a question I may get asked at some point in terms of the regional approach to how we do things. So that's good to know there. And then secondly, and I think I know the answer, but I want to ask it. So the criteria that we use outside of what we said from the board were priorities. Is there anything in any of this, and I just don't know, so I'm asking, so forgive me if it's a question that I should know, I just don't. When it comes to equity and inclusiveness and how folks are, go into for all our housing programs that are here, are there any criteria, or do we ask of that in the application, how you're building inclusivity and equity into your program as it relates to permanent supportive housing, RAP, and rehousing?
Yes,
Sean,
thank you.
go ahead, sorry.
Go ahead, Nathan. Go ahead.
I was going to kick it to Shantae, actually. Shantae, do you want to answer that one?
Sure. Thanks so much. So just to answer that question, there are questions specific in the application to how this particular program and organizations contributes to your regional race equity plan. How do they plan to connect with individuals, and how do they plan to keep individuals connected to the system in an equal and equitable way? So that is a narrative that they do have to provide, where they would get, I believe it was an additional couple of points on that, whether or not that they address that. And they also are asked to kind of talk about the ways in which they do that. So it's one thing just to say, yes, we do this. It's another way to say, well, we actually do it by X, Y, Z, and connecting folks through whatever resources and means that they may or may not have. So hopefully that answers your question.
It does. Perfect. Thank you both so much. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, one additional thing that I think is important to also recognize is that the scorecard this year, that is actually a new addition to this year's scorecard. And I think as we move forward, right now it was more of a narrative section where they would describe what it is they're doing, not only for staff, but also for the programmatic issues. I think as we move forward, we're going to be looking for some more measurable outcomes with regards to race and equity to ensure that they're actually implementing, and what are some of those outcomes associated with that.
And one last thing I'd like to add to that, and anyone on the rank and review can answer this. If I'm not mistaken, in the coordinated entry expansion process, application, part of that is how do we as a region incorporate DEI into our actual referral and selection process. Am I correct in that? If someone who was on the ranking review could speak to that. Or Nikki.
Was the question, Ryan, does this connect to the region's larger emphasis on diversity, equity?
The question was in the actual expansion project for coordinated entry that we have ranked, at least in option C, in tier 2, there was part of that application was speaking to enhancing our DEI principles. Is that not correct? Or is that correct?
If I'm being honest, I would have to look at the questions.
Yeah.
Because I can't remember the questions verbatim.
Yeah. And I apologize, Ryan. I could definitely look into that and get back to you, but I'm pretty sure that that was a part of that.
Yeah. I thought that part of the enhancements that we want to make in coordinated entry are directly related to how are we looking at DEI and making sure that all of our processes about how you get into our system at all, and then how are you referred, are taking DEI into consideration. And I'm sorry, I'm consolidating on DEI.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I think you are actually referring to the coordinated entry evaluation and part of that, rather than these applications specifically.
Okay.
So these applications were specifically looking at how do we expand coordinated entry in general, and then part of that evaluation has been looking at race equity and will continue to look at race equity and those numbers around coordinated entry.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Okay, anything else from the board before we move on to comments from the audience? I can't see everybody on the board on my screen, so I don't see any hands up. Okay, I'm going to move on to public. Are there any public comments from the audience?
As a reminder to the public, you can raise your hand and we will allow you to speak. Amy Schwabenlander.
Thank you. Am I good to go?
Yep,
absolutely.
You're good. We can hear you.
I just want to thank you all, thank the Rank and Review Committee, and appreciate seeing the expansion of HMIS and coordinated entry systems farther up tier 2. It's not the first time that any of us have asked for additional dollars to do better really in the infrastructure pieces of the coordinated or the continuum of care and its systems. So I do appreciate that. It's not entirely clear to me how the HMIS expansion would be ranked over the coordinated entry expansion. So I don't know if there's any more clarity on I know the presenter said it was tied to board priorities. I'm not sure what that meant. Thank you.
Thanks, Amy. Is there someone on rank and review or staff that could please respond?
I don't know if anybody from the Rank and Review Subcommittee wants to maybe explain some of the conversations that you all held around that decision.
Yeah, I mean, I can start, and then the other panelists, please, pitch in as you see fit. One of the things that went into that consideration was the absolute need for data to support past and future expansion of all kinds of projects, and the need to do more real-time assessment of data to be able to shift and do whatever with programs so that they're able to function really, really well. And so I think that was a big part of it. They presented a very concise and what we thought was compelling set of things that they would do with this, again, in terms of how they would staff and leveraging the business intelligence for these projects. And so and then we know that there's also some investment that's set to go into an assessment of coordinated entry to see, what we really want out of that. That's still coming. And so we thought it would be really important to make sure that it was in tier 2. And worst case scenario, if it wasn't funded in tier 2, that would buy the community some time to carry out that assessment process to see exactly what coordinated entry should look like, should be like, from whatever comes out of that assessment. So I know that was part of what went into it, but if the other panelists want to add, please do.
Thank you, Nate. That was helpful.
Yeah, I generally agree with you, Nate. I think the other thing is just some of their staffing patterns with regards to the staffing ratio at Solari in comparison to comparable agencies across the country. It was just clear that they definitely were in need of some staff.
Thank you, Matthew. Appreciate that. Amy, I hope that helps. Shantae, did you have something to add? No? Okay.
No, I was really just going to support Nathan and Matthew and what they already said, and just thinking about as our community grows, we do need that data and that infrastructure to support that. Not to say that coordinated entry does not equally need that, but as Nathan said, there is that coordinated entry evaluation that's really going to help us figure out what is it specifically that we need to properly grow and expand our coordinated entry systems that serves the community as a whole, as a region, and really just being supportive of that. But if there are other questions, we're more than happy to answer.
I appreciate that. All right. Are there any other questions or comments from the public? I did not see any additional hands.
None.
I'm just going to give it a minute. Sorry, Katie, go ahead.
I just said I see none.
You don't see any? Okay. I don't feel like I can see everybody that's online. I don't know if it's just the way my computer is set or not, but I think I can only see panelists maybe. I'm not sure.
Yes, that is correct, Madam
Okay.
Chair.
Can you see everybody else?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So I just want to give that a minute to make sure it's really important that our community have an opportunity to ask questions, seek clarification, make comments. So I just want to give that a second. In the meantime, I will, again, just thank the Ranking and Review Committee. I know that you did extremely thorough work, and I'm looking at the membership, and it's a great, diverse, knowledgeable group in many different areas. So I'm very proud to have such a esteemed group available in our community to do this work. And I also want to just say thank you to all of the providers who turned in these applications. That is also not an easy task, and also took time to make presentations while still running the excellent services that you do. I know that's probably the ultimate work. So an extra special thank you to you all for doing this work that you do every year and putting yourself out there and putting your best foot forward to serve our community. Very much appreciate that. Katie, anything? No? Okay. Then seeing no other questions or comments, it looks like we have 3 choices. So option A, option B, and option C. So I would ask for a motion from a board member to select an option and make a motion. And if that option doesn't pass, we can go with another option.
This is Liz, real quick. I'm not a professional at this just yet. So I think I need to recuse myself from the vote too. Is that correct, Katie?
Yes, both Liz and Jackie, you will have to recuse yourself because you are both listed in this ranking.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, understood. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay.
Madam
So do I have a motion for any particular option from another board member?
Madam Chair, I would move to support the committee's recommendation of option C.
And I second. This is Tad.
Okay, thank you. I have a first from Eric and a second from Tad. Do I have any discussion? All right, I'm going to take the no discussion as an excellent presentation from the committee, an excellent work done. So I would ask then, Katie, can you please take roll call on the vote?
Yes, Chair Belch.
Yes, for sure.
Eric Cole.
Aye.
Elizabeth DaCosta.
Recuse?
Thank you. Marshall Franklin.
Yes.
Tad Gary.
Yes.
Chris Hallett.
Yes.
Jackie Taylor.
Recuse.
The motion passes with 2 recused.
Great. Congratulations to everyone for this tremendous work that's being done in our community. Thank you for a smooth process. Thank you for joining us today. It's good to see some of your faces. Well, it's good to see all of your faces, but I haven't seen some of them in a long time. So good to see you. All right, we're going to move on to our next board agenda, which is an update on the Regional Homelessness Action Plan. TJ Reed, Regional Homelessness Project Manager, will provide an update. TJ?
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Let me turn on my video. And then Katie, are you going to be able to? Awesome. All right. I can't see it, but okay, there it is. All right. So this is just an update. As you all know, we have basically agreed to provide an update every board meeting on where things are at with the regional strategies, and are wanting to ensure that this board is not only informed, but has active roles in providing feedback and support for this. So next slide.
Sorry, my computer's having a slow delay.
It's okay. I have a book of dad jokes if we want to revert to that as well. So Eric, I think, is pretty excited about that one. All right, so this item really is just to say that we want to update you all, and then we want to invite your specific feedback on the role. You'll see that I've kind of highlighted a few of these items once we get to it. So yeah, go ahead to that next slide, Katie. So here's just a brief overview of what has happened since May. We've really met with a regional coordination team 7 different times that was full of all of the local and tribal governments, met with the regional continuum of care, management committee and regional council, and then meetings individually with each government leadership, and then had various community partner meetings, such as some focus groups with our providers. There's been a lot of work done over the last few months to really ensure that this is incorporating everyone's feedback and is in alignment with really what we're trying to achieve as a community. Next slide. All right, and so as you all are well aware, these are the three core categories: committing to the work regionally, increasing the housing options, and then supporting diverse partnerships. Next slide. And so really what I'm looking for throughout this is we have highlighted the ones where we've heard feedback from yourselves and where it would really make sense for the Maricopa Regional Continuum of Care Board to really play an active role in the implementation of those action steps. So what I'm looking for here, either throughout or afterwards, your feedback on like if this feels right to you, if you think that there would be some action steps that you would like to be involved with more, just let us know. We're not going to spend a ton of time on this because I know you all have seen this, but the one on the first primary action category of committing to the work regionally that the board we would see as involved with is that improving access to data on homelessness, really enhancing HMIS. This is very much in alignment with what you all just talked about with the NOFO allocations, and then also continued work related to looking at vendors, looking at ways of improving access to data related to homelessness. On this slide, we also have increasing resources to homelessness from our local and tribal governments, regional public education campaign, and then really just keeping this plan on track by tracking those items. But the primary one that we have heard your feedback on was that you would all be involved in the HMIS one. So I think what I'll do is, if it's okay, Madam Chair and members of the board, if we just stop after each of these and to just kind of open it up for feedback. Is there anything on this first action category that you all feel like is missing, where you feel like you would want to take an active role in leadership, or do you think that the bolded is sufficient for now? All right.
Hey, TJ, this is Chad. I think what you have here is good, as well as the level of support from the board, but I'm just curious, obviously this is a high level look, so some of my questions might be more in the weeds than maybe what we were hoping for. But
Sure.
For number one, increase ongoing financial and in-kind resources from local and tribal governments. So the local part, there's been some meetings with the Arizona Department of Housing, and I know Amy and others have been participating in those from MAG. But really there's been a call to kind of coordinate more closely with the Department of Housing, especially with ARPA funding out there and stuff. And so when we say local, would that be inclusive of that kind of close coordination with the Department of Housing, particularly given the time that we're in and the funding that's coming to the state? I just want to kind of understand kind of where we're landing with that.
No, that's a great question. I think our goal here is really to engage with the local and tribal governments that would include just like municipalities, cities, and towns, knowing that full well as a regional entity, we are working with ADO and others to ensure that there's layered on top of that. So one of the conversations we've had pretty significantly with a lot of local and tribal governments is that like we will work to pair your local resources, whether that's in kind or financial, with regional resources like from the state, whether it's the Department of Housing, whether that is access, whether that is the Maricopa County in general. And so the goal here is that it would be inclusive of those. This particular action step is really focused on those local and tribal governments. It's really focused on doing something new for homelessness. So all of those within Maricopa County and the extending areas, that we're taking at least one new action towards homelessness and prioritization. But I get that feedback, and I think we can look at that to see if that's something we want to clarify in this bullet point, or if that is covered elsewhere, because we do have, you'll see in our third category that we talked about kind of that coordination with other sectors and ensuring that we're kind of incorporating the broader funders that are not just at the local or municipal level.
Okay,
I don't know
no,
if that
that
answers
makes
your
sense, and
question, but yeah.
I wasn't really sure. I was thinking it would probably land somewhere.
Yeah.
But I think from a board member perspective, having that be somewhere in here, I think would probably be important, because I do think we may be missing out if we're not, obviously I know that MAG staff and others are at the table, but if that could be represented in the plan somewhere, somehow, even if that's just a roll up and we all agree that it's, on this high level, we're kind of talking about that work, I think would be fine too.
Awesome. Thank you, Tad. I absolutely agree. And we are 100% on board with that too. Any other comments or questions on this first slide?
TJ, may I?
Yeah, of course. Go ahead, Amy.
Madam Chair, members of the board, just want to emphasize that point and just lean into that a little bit more. We are starting to meet, and I actually have already met with a few different entities who are interested in contributing funding to support the implementation of this plan. And so while we're talking about local and tribal governments supporting these regional efforts, it does include the as well as partners. Some partners would be local foundations, it would be the Department of Housing, it would be Access, it would be any number of different funding partners that we're working with and have been working with. And so we're excited to be able to continue working with them and look forward to the board's support in identifying appropriate resources. And I think it was exciting with the Rankin review vote that just took place, that it very much aligns with these regional efforts. And I think that we're all pulling in the same direction, which I think is really, really important just to have that alignment, and look forward to continued dialogue to be able to continue that alignment and to strengthen that moving into the future. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Amy. All right,
TJ, this is Ryan.
Go ahead, Ryan. Mm-hmm.
I just want to sort of echo Tad's sentiments in that I've looked at this plan a million times. I've heard this presentation in multiple settings. I've participated in the implementation group, and I did not recognize until Tad just pointed it out that we have not articulated who our other partners are. So and I think that's really important. So I'm just wondering if one suggestion might be in that first bullet to just instead of saying as well as partners, to say as well as state, business, foundation, faith. Maybe we can make that a little bit more specific. I as he said it, I thought, wow, yeah, that's important. That's my feedback.
Madam Chair, members of the board, thank you for that feedback. We definitely want to make sure that there's a shared understanding around what that means. In the action plan itself, when you read that item, we do list out some of our partners, and then in the community highlights section, which has been moved to an appendix based on the feedback from the Regional Homelessness Coordination Team, that does list some additional partners who are actively contributing funding in this space, such as Maricopa County, who's already allocated millions of dollars in this space. And there are other entities as well who are engaged in this. So we definitely want to make sure that we continue highlighting those partnerships that are bringing resources to the table. And we'll certainly seek to promote greater awareness around who those partners are.
Wonderful. Thank you, Amy.
It looks like Eric has his hand raised.
Yeah, thank you, Amy. Thank you, TJ. It's a great presentation, and I'm agree with everybody else. It's been a good process throughout. We may be coming back to this at a later point in your presentation, so I'm sorry. But
it's okay.
On the second bullet around access to improving access to HMIS, I think it's important, just to note that at the same time, we need to be looking at, as we're expanding access, we're looking at how the HMIS does get used and what those parameters look like, particularly for partners that are non-service providers or local governments, et cetera, just so we have that, we are also treating our data securely and with, holding up the trust of the folks that are using HMIS on the day-to-day basis too. Just a note. Thanks.
Yeah, no, thank you. And great points. And that's why I really feel that we highlighted this one, because the board and the data subcommittee in particular will play a big role in the review of that data, because any new data requests or any data that is going outwards to the community will go through that, and then that will be recommended to the board. And so great points, and that is of utmost importance. And then the only other thing that I'll mention to you all here is that I don't know if, I believe Katie sent it out, but if not, we'll send it out after the most updated version of the more detailed document. And I would just encourage you to read through that as well, because I think to everyone's points thus far, this is a real high level overview. There's a lot more detail in that document. So I'll just point that out here. And then with that, Katie, next slide. All right, and so the next one is really focused on increasing safe housing options. So we had the board highlighted in 3 areas here. Really the increase in focus on temporary housing and permanent housing, because the board interacts so much with providers and with the housing inventory and with the rank and review. There's a lot of aspects which the board is involved in these. And then the 4th one here is the assess and enhance the coordinated entry system. This was a part of the board's adopted priorities of strategies. And then this is continuing on with the now approved evaluation that will be underway shortly, and kind of enhancing and looking for areas for improvement in the coordinated entry system. The other 2 on here is increasing access to and maintaining existing rental units, and then the supporting eviction prevention by expanding those diversion programs, which was really focused on rent assistance, legal aid, and housing stability. Again, and if you're not highlighted here, it's not that the board will likely have no involvement whatsoever. It's more just like, which of these will the board feel as more of a leader in and being heavily involved in? So any feedback or questions on these ones in particular? All right, with that, next slide. And so our last one, as we mentioned, focuses on diverse partnerships. And the one really here that we focused on is increasing access to local services. This one is heavily emphasizing street outreach. This board and the infrastructure with the outreach collaborative and with some of our core members being associated with outreach providers, there's a lot of value add that I think the board and the corresponding COC can support with here to add a lot of value to this plan and to our region. The other ones here, though, are increasing the regional support for homeless interventions, specifically focused on criminal justice, police departments, et cetera, expanding employment opportunities through public-private partnerships, and then the interdepartmental teams within those local and tribal governments. So any feedback on this slide? All right, next slide, Katie. Next slide. So the next steps and kind of what our time frame looks like here is in October, we're offering this draft for review, comment, and making any needed changes. And that's what we've been doing consistently. Even though some of the core points are the same, you'll see that document has changed probably like 1 billion times now. And we're very grateful of that, because that means people are interacting with it. And so we appreciate you all and everybody else who has given feedback. November, the plan is to offer that to this board as well as the management committee for action. And then December, there's going to be a special regional council session. A couple of things of note here. I don't know if we've mentioned it in this meeting before, but this is, I believe, the first special session that MAG has done for regional council. And it is the first special session or session in general that has purely focused on homelessness, which both of which may seem like superfluous details to some, but for us is really exciting because of the fact that it shows that this is of value to everyone right now. And then lastly is that January, where it's really getting into implementation and supporting that. Next slide. All right, and this is again my contact information and Amy's. So any other comments or questions that you all have, never hesitate to reach out by text, email, whatever. And so with that, I hope this was useful for you. I know you've seen this information before. We wanted to just make sure that we highlighted in particular the ways in which the board would engage, and want to make sure that you're feeling apprised of all the goings-ons of what is happening. So we thank you. And with that, I'll give it back to you, Madam Chair.
All right, thank you so much, TJ. every time I hear it, I pick up something new, and it's just becoming more and more clear. And I'm so happy about that. I know just by way of sort of sharing with the public, I got to be involved in one of the meetings with I can't remember how many it is now, like 25 to 28, I think, meetings with local electeds, mayors and city managers. And it was great to see their level of knowledge about, as you were presenting, their level of interaction and knowledge about what's going on, and their commitment to really being a part of this. So that just speaks to how well you all have done in making this an inclusive, very interactive process for people, for all communities to participate in this planning. And I think you've really created a lot of buy-in, and I for one am very excited to see this move forward. So thank you so much for that. Are there any other comments from the board before we move out? I don't see any hands. Okay, so moving on to the next agenda, we're going to talk a little bit about the learning management system overview. Again, TJ Reed is going to provide an overview of the learning management system and then ask for volunteers to participate in a work group for next steps. TJ?
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the board. Apologies in advance that you get me for like 3 items in a row. So thanks for your patience. So this one is learning management system. Some of you on this board may have heard about this before as well, but really what the overall idea here is that we're consolidating and simplifying trainings specifically so they're available to our providers in the Maricopa region. Those that are connected to the Continuum and even those that are not, but those that are really focused on homelessness. So Pima County has worked on this. They have a system that is up right now that basically is a repository for trainings. And we've met with them several times, and I met with several stakeholders in our community who shoulder a lot of the burden of trainings, and made sure to get some feedback before even bringing that to this board to make sure that we have at least some initial interest from folks. But the idea is that we would really target this in a couple of different phases. One, if possible, and if we are able, we would partner with Pima County to be able to consolidate trainings into one system. This could incorporate live trainings, but it could also be virtual trainings. And so this is something that would allow for trainings like for Shared Housing Institute, all of them to be stored on one location and everybody could access those. So on a very preliminary and almost immediate level, we would be able to access trainings in one space and be able to store trainings that we have for our community long term, so people could go back and access those things in a very simple way. In a longer term way, the group and we had talked about of things that you may have heard in the community of trying to really standardize and almost have like accreditations for specific types of trainings. Like we tie to our contracts like trainings that, hey, this is a training for emergency shelter. And if you're a case manager, here is a pathway of 40 hours worth of trainings that are really essential and best practices for our emergency shelters. So if you go through this, you will basically be at this very strong level, or at least a baseline level of what is best practices and standards of training and practice for emergency shelters. And the second longer term thing that we've heard a lot of feedback around is really as it ties to professional development specific to race and equity. So one of those things is what we've found through all of our research, and is not a secret to anybody, is the fact that our organizations are actually quite diverse, but on the leadership side, they're not. And so we have a lot of diverse people on the front line. And so how can we, as a community, standardize and promote professional development and growth through a learning management system that offers things like shelter supervisor training or management trainings and certificates or something like that, so that people within our continuum and within our homeless service have access to resources and learning and training to be able to get to that next level of their career, so that they can be in leadership positions in an easier way. And so overall, I think there was a lot of excitement from everybody that we've talked to about this, because a lot of people have been interested in this for a long time. And I think there's been a number of reasons why it hasn't really surfaced, but we're going to take this opportunity to say, let's just do something about it. If we actually care about standardization of trainings, ease of access, professional development, and race and equity among our staff, let's just do this. And one of the ways that we wanted to do that is incorporating the board. This is something done through the board in Pima County. And so, and that is approved by the Continuum. And so we would like to incorporate this going forward with our community. One of the ways in which we would do that is establishing a work group of people some who are lived experience, some who are providers, and some who are in leadership positions like yourselves, to be able to really guide the direction of this for the short term, but also the long term. And so what I would ask of the board today is any questions you have for me or discussion points. I'm more than willing to go into what I know up to this point. And then secondly, just your approval of going forward with the work group, in addition to if you would like to volunteer or have suggestions on how we engage with group members. We personally, we would like to move forward on this pronto. We have opportunities right now where it would benefit the community, like the Shared Housing Institute and having those trainings accessible. This is a longer term commitment though, right? There is ways in which it can be beneficial now, but also this is something that could impact policies that we adjust in the future, right? And so I know that was a lot, but I would encourage any discussion, any questions, and then also, like I said, that approval of a work group if you're okay with it, and then suggestions on volunteers. So back to you, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much, TJ. This sounds very exciting, actually. I would like to take all of those trainings. Things are always changing at every level, and I'm always wanting to be more up to date, on whatever new knowledge and skills are out there. So I'm excited for myself and everybody else. So board comments.
Yeah, Madam Chair, this is Tad. I do have a question for TJ real quick, if that's okay.
Of course, please.
Yeah. So I think definitely this is a great idea, and I think does potentially has the opportunity to help significantly those folks out in the housing community with workforce development and whatnot. The solution, that the learning management system that you're proposing, TJ, is that like you guys just want to kind of run with that one that's being done in Pima County? Is that the intention, is to already kind of go with that, but then kind of have the work group kind of talk through the implementation of that and get that set up? Or what is the kind of intention of this work group?
So I would say it is a bit of both, right? That we want a leadership structure from the Continuum to drive this work. People who are involved with it, who would be impacted by its implementation, to drive all of the aspects of it. So that means how do we support the cost of the actual management system? What content are we including? How are we managing our side of it? I will say from a regional lens, I am really interested, and I know there are a lot of other people interested in partnering with Pima and potentially even pulling in the balance of state to have a statewide system where we would have our own individual community portals, but there would be some standards that are available to everybody, right? Like trauma-informed care is not different between Tucson and Phoenix. So let's have trauma-informed care standardized for homeless services for the whole state, right? So I think there is vision in the sense of being able to do this on a statewide level to really focus on this, which is really great. However, that working group, I think, would be sort of the hands and feet of the board to really drive the leadership of this, and then report back to the board on the decisions that would be made.
Okay. And just and that Pima solution probably is the best solution. It sounds like TJU and others have been really looking at this. I just wanted to throw out that the the Medicaid system here in Arizona has an LMS system as
Yes.
well that has a lot of built-in content too that may or may not be aligned with the housing needs. But that is, when you talk about trauma-informed care and, cultural aspects, all of that is in there. A lot of the housing providers that we're speaking of are also Medicaid providers as well. So they're going in that system. So it's just, again, I'm not plugging one thing over the other. Honestly, I wouldn't have, I don't think I'm in a position to be doing that because I don't have, haven't done a thorough research myself, but I just wanted to throw that out there as well. And you guys may have already contemplated that. So
no, I think that's great feedback, Tad. And I know that we, I used to work at Solari and was in Relias as well. And I think one of the, I would hope that we would have somebody from Mercy Care Access to be able to provide some of that feedback in this working group to see what works. I think we have not decided that we're going with this LMS. It's more of that Relias is expensive, I think, and we're trying to find a solution that fits within the budgets of our homeless service providers. That would honestly be one of the only reasons that we would we would go towards this other solution is because of some of the costs. But great points, and I would hope that you all could have representation on that working group to provide some of that feedback.
Okay, great, thanks.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions or comments from the board on this one?
Madam Chair, we have a question from the audience.
Okay. Can you please read it?
Or Amy, I believe you can now unmute.
Oh, thank you, Madam Chair. Amy Schwabenlander, Human Services Campus. I hope I'm not the only one watching and participating in your meeting today.
Me too.
I guess my question or a really strong consideration is to ask the COC committee to be engaged in the development of whatever LMS. I know the committee always craves actionable work. And since the committee is made up of providers, I guess I love all of you as board members, and I think this is a great committee level activity to make sure that people on the front lines are early on in the development of it, and maybe flip that the level of participation. So the level of participation is more the committee and less so the board. And by doing that, I would volunteer myself to be
sure. And Amy, yeah, thanks for the question, Amy, and members of the board. I think that is the intent is, I would say that it is to approve a work group, and the work group would be made of providers. I think the suggestion of bringing it to the committee is great. The only issue and why we would recommend a work group over the committee is I think this involves more dedicated time than the agenda would allow on the monthly committee meetings. And so having a work group dedicated to spending very specific time on this and this alone, and maybe even reporting to the committee to get feedback from there, that may be a great suggestion. I think it just doing it in the committee alone, I think would probably not have enough ample time to do what we need to do.
Okay, thank you so much, TJ. I know that we have a couple of board members that are going to have to leave it right at 3 today. So I want to make sure we get through some important votes. So would it be appropriate, could we do a vote, or actually it looks like we don't even need to take action on this, is that correct? But we were hoping to get volunteers. I'm wondering if that's something we can do outside of this meeting, especially since we want it to be driven by the committee and providers. Can we find another way to solicit volunteers, as long as the board is feeling positive about us moving forward?
That works for us,
Okay.
Madam Chair and members of the board.
Okay, does that sound good to board members? Okay, I'm looking at some nodding heads. Okay, great, thank you. I'm going to quickly then move on to, and thank you so much, Amy. I also hope that you are not the only one paying attention, and that was a wonderful suggestion, and I'm glad we're moving forward in that way. So moving on to item 7, Learning Action and Policy Partnership Project Update. TJ, again, is going to provide us an update and discuss the fees associated with the project. And following that, we will need a motion to approve the transfer of funds to Solari Crisis and Human Services, if that is the will of the board. So TJ?
Yeah, thank you, Matt. Sorry. Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the board. So the idea here is there was a funder associated with this project that we presented to you before, who gave money to each continuum of care to be able to administer this data lake and data sharing project for the state. And some of that money went to the Maricopa Continuum of Care. And as you see in your agenda, the specific amount, our recommendation, which we would is up for vote and approval of the board, is that that 6,500 would go to Solari, as Solari is the primary partner in this particular project, that they are the one doing a lot of the work around policy, around pulling of data, around expending staff resources to accommodate the requests and needs of this particular group. I know Liz, Charles are members of the board and members of the LAPP group, so I would encourage them to chime in as well. I don't think Charles is on, but the idea here is that for us, it makes sense that they are the primary partner in this who's doing all of the work. We want to make sure that money gets in the hands of those and so they can be made whole for the time that they're expending. But with that, I don't know, Liz, I know I'm putting you on the spot, but I don't know if you have any other thoughts or on that based on your involvement in the group.
And this is specific to the LAP group. This is not also inclusive of the learning management system?
Correct. This is just the LAPP data lake and the data sharing group.
Okay, yeah, I mean, I would support that. So far it's been super beneficial trying to figure out how we can have the two systems interact, the Medicaid system and the homeless management information system. Just from a client perspective, we had somebody staying at Heat Relief and they were also on an ACT team. Both parties didn't know they were on an ACT team or at Heat Relief. So we can hopefully solve that just through data share down the road. Solari's at the table helping to pool the ESG reports, helping to understand what exact data elements from HMIS would be recommended in this data share. And I think that they're the leader in the group and I totally support it.
Awesome. Thank you, Liz. So that's basically it. So with that, I'll send it back to you, Madam Chair. And if there are any questions or comments, I can try to answer them to the best of my ability as well.
Thank you, TJ and Liz. Comments from the board, questions? I don't see any hands. No hands. Okay. All right. Well, if there aren't any questions or comments, do I have a motion to approve the transfer of $6,500 to assist in fees with this project to Solari Crisis and Human Services?
This is Tad, so moved.
Thank you, Tad.
That's Chris, I'll second.
Thank you, Chris. We have a first and a second. Is there any discussion? If there is, please just speak up. I'm having a hard time seeing hands today.
Don't see anyone.
Okay, thank you very much. Would you please take the roll call, Katie?
Chair Balch,
Yes.
Mr. Cole,
Aye.
Elizabeth DaCosta,
Aye.
Marshall Franklin. Marshall, you're on mute. All right, I'll come back. Tad Gary,
Yes.
Chris Hallett.
Aye.
That is all. Marshall, are you still there? All right, the motion passes.
All right, thank you very much. I'm excited about this as well. And thank you to Solari for taking a lead on this. Appreciate it. Okay, moving on to the next agenda item, System Flow Dashboard. TJ will provide an update on the System Flow Dashboard and the quarterly synopsis.
All right. Madam Chair, members of the board, Katie, are you going to pull that up, or would you prefer me to? The document. Overall, what was approved by the board, I believe 2 months ago, was that the system flow dashboard produced by Solari will not necessarily go completely out and just shared with everybody. But what would happen is this would be available to all continuums, work groups, committees, subcommittees, and the board. And that quarterly, there would be a synthesis of that information to be produced publicly to you all, to everybody, to inform and make sure that there's clear overview of what is happening in the status of homelessness. So what MAG has met with Solari, and we went and got approval and support through the data subcommittee of devising what data points would be on that synthesis and some of the process associated with it. So you are all on board with that. And so what we wanted to do is just share that information with you right now and make sure you have it if you want to review it at a later time and provide more feedback. But really what we're trying to do here is just get this moving, right? Is to make sure that you all are on board with the data that is being presented, so that when we share this information out, it is useful, which is kind of our primary point here. We don't want to just share data to have more data out there, right? We want this to be really clear, concise for people to understand what's happening, and to be able to take action on it if they see fit. So overall, here is kind of I'll walk through all of this as quickly as I can. So number one, our audience is really community members and human services staff that have some knowledge of the homeless system. So this is not necessarily going to be down to the level of like, hey, even if you know nothing about homelessness, you'll totally know exactly what's going on. Some of it will make sense to you, but some of it will have some detail that is very specific to the homeless system. And we'll get into that in a little bit. The next two are really the board and then the committees and subcommittees. So making sure that you all have what you need to, and it's useful. The objectives here are to show the status and trends in the number of people experiencing homelessness. So some of the specifics are identifying program coverage and number of programs providing services during that time period, race, ethnicity breakdowns of our actively homeless population, showing comparisons to the general population. So that would be to show, are there equities? So if our general population has X% white, shouldn't it be, if it was equitable, it would be the same in the homeless population. So this would be to show equities or inequities. The next one is trends in subpopulation with qualitative descriptions of anything that stands out. So we had in our annual PIT report, there were trend lines showing of each subpopulation. So like families, domestic violence, and you'll see below chronic, older adults, youth, veterans, etc. And you'll see each of those in their trend lines. And we would add narrative there to say, here's what's going on. We noticed this. There is a 110% spike in older adults over the last couple of months. So that would be highlighted for you all. The next two are really a status and trends for key system performance measures. So Solari has been producing this quarterly as a PowerPoint. We thought this would be a really clear way of tying in what is happening on the need side to how we're doing as a community with the system performance measures. You'll see the data points below for what specifically those are. And then last is municipal trends. So this would be something of zip code of last permanent address, active by month. If you all have seen the point in time reports where there's literally just a table that shows the number of people over years, this would be over months to show trends of each local municipality and area. So if you want to, and anyone feel free to chime in here or raise your hand and we can stop to answer any questions. Liz?
Just fantastic. Again, if you could, so yeah, on the race ethnicity breakdown of active homeless population, can we also show comparison with coordinated entry referral data? Because we have
coordinated entry referral data, okay.
So we have it compared with general population, but how can we look at it from, okay, these are our active homeless and how does it compare with those getting referred from our coordinated entry system?
Interesting. Okay. Yeah, let me put that on our list to discuss and talk about feasibility. I'm not sure if Ty was able to get on as a panelist, but we can at least take that back and discuss that for sure. Okay, so now here are the very specific data points, and we broke these down into longitudinal versus snapshot. So longitudinal would be things that we would show over time. So this would be like a broken line chart of basically like July, August, September. This is what we're seeing, and you would be able to fit, visually see the differences. So we would talk about total active singles and families and total households. We would talk about the number of placements that we have per month, the number of new clients that we're seeing to the system every month, total active by subpopulation. And the subpopulations that we have listed here are chronic, older adults, youth, and veterans. And then so on the first of the month, list a snapshot of the programs broken down by program type and the number of clients being served. Show this over time. So this would be X number of shelters served, X number of clients at this particular juncture, to really show how many providers are involved in that, how many clients are being served on a particular night by those folks. Then we get to system performance measures. And so this is that list right there, reducing first-time homeless, et cetera. I'll let you guys read through that. And then the last is a table of municipal trends as described above. So those would be over time. Now we look at snapshot data. So if you scroll down a little bit, Katie, this would be that comparison data that we were talking about. So we would have total percentage of our active by race, ethnicity, gender, and age. Then we would look at that in comparison to the census data, percentage, race, ethnicity, gender, and age. So you would be able to see, how does our general population of race, ethnicity, gender, and age compare to our homeless population of race, ethnicity, gender, and age. Then lastly, in terms of what would be available, is we would have some bullet points that would just be narrative descriptors of what is happening. Key notes that are happening. We're seeing right now some substantial increases. So narrative would include, hey, here is what we're seeing. We are seeing a dramatic increase of our new clients over the last several months. Okay, so before we go on to the process, is there any comments on data points, things that you feel like are missing? Liz, got that information of referrals broken down by race. Any other comments? Tad, you have your hand up?
Yeah, just a quick question. How much have we overlaid these data points with the regional action plan? And is there data elements? I mean, have we done that by chance? Is this like aligned with that as well?
Yes, it absolutely is. And I think that's a very, very good question, Tad. And these are really holding hands. One, that accessibility of data action step is really in line with what is, and this is sort of the first pass of what would be included. So we include this, and then we start to solicit additional feedback of how we could grow this to ensure that every single decision maker has what they need in terms of the homeless status and breakdown to be able to effectively make decisions.
Okay, because the only one that comes to mind, but again, it could be in here somehow, is in the action plan, there's a piece that relates to outreach that you called it street outreach and that component, but I don't see anything that necessarily ties to that. And I would think that that's a bit of system flow though as well, but I'm just, again, just one thing to consider. So
no, great feedback, Tad. I think we can look into that. And let me just double check. Ty, are you able to? No, he's not. Okay. I think there are some answer or responses to that, Tad. I think we have street outreach data within the system. I think there is some question marks around validity of some of the points that we would bring up. However, we do have some of the stuff on the hand up tool that talks about street outreach touches. So it may be maybe not necessarily something we add to this, but something that we ensure people have access to with our other tools, which I think is actually the next agenda item too. But either way, heard that street outreach is important. It's on the action plan. where are we showing the data for that?
Yeah.
Liz?
Yeah, I love Tad's thought on that. And I understand like right now we're kind of getting the first part of the ship built. So this is fantastic. But yeah, bumping it up against the regional plan, because in one of them, it's the goal to reduce homelessness through a regional approach. And I wonder if there's anything on like shelter beds that we can see where we can monitor to see, you know, shelter beds coming up in other areas. So we can kind of see the effects of it put into action through like, you know, regional beds coming up in different areas outside of the downtown Phoenix area or in Mesa. And then the other thing is we have that goal of increasing permanent supportive housing units or units. So if we had in this dashboard, like our baseline where we're at right now with number of units, and then like where that was to our goal, that would be great. The final thing, TJ, is just apply that same method to, you had the snapshot information. If you can apply that same method of number of referrals from coordinated entry to your race net.
Yeah.
That'd be great. Okay.
Perfect. No, thank you, Liz. I think that's a really good thought. And let me make sure I understand what you're saying. So you're saying maybe we just literally show the goal of we want X number of beds and here's what we're seeing in the increases. So like this could be an avenue to show perhaps the number of new beds that are coming to be available. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, it's really going back and looking at the regional action plan and then having some type of a dashboard that shows us where we're at with implementation in those different categories. So we talk about the regional approach for shelter expansion to reduce homelessness. So how can our dashboard show us, okay, here's this increase in shelter beds in this other area so that we can see that it's happening?
Yeah. No, great feedback, Liz. And I think we will see some of that based on what is listed here as that first of the month snapshot. Basically, that first of the month snapshot is like a mini pit where it shows by program type how many service providers are in there and how many clients are being served. So over time, you will start to see that based on new improvements, you'll see that increase. But yeah, I think that's a really great feedback around more tying in and visualizations to the regional action plan.
Maybe even last thing, do we add city there? Broken down by program type, number of clients being served, and location, or something around location.
Okay. Thank you, Liz. All right. And then any other feedback on the actual data? All right. Well, and please reach out to me after this if you have any feedback that you're unable to share at this moment or you think of something. The process that we're looking at is monthly. Oh,
Chris had something to add. Sorry.
Oh, hi, Chris. Go ahead.
Sorry. Hi, thank you. Just real quick, I had to click off the buttons, but I know I've heard a lot of interest in this data from Valley cities in particular. I'm sure many cities would be interested in this data, and they're not too happy to hear that it's going to be synthesized and static and presented to them versus, and I'm trying to get a sense exactly what they're trying to access and why. So having said that, and I'm trying to explain kind of both ways, what you guys have pitched is the why. It makes a lot of sense, you know, to limit questioning and whatnots. However, on the flip side, if there is an opportunity as needed for like ad hoc, you know, once you present some of this at whatever scale you're doing it, if it's a regional scale, and when you say city, I'm guessing it's more zip code and not actual city. I think cities in particular, any number of providers might want us to get a glimpse of a data set that you're presenting on this list here and a more minute or scale, you know, in other words. And would we be able to facilitate that is really the question. If they had an ad hoc question, not open to the world, but, you know, as needed. We do that a lot with MAG on, hey, I need this, and they'll run something nice. So that's basically my question.
Yeah, so great questions, Chris. A couple of comments to that. So one is the system flow dashboard, even if produced publicly, does not have any city level data on it. So there wouldn't be any ability for people, even if they had access directly to it, to see their city count. The goal of this would be to show that, so that it's broken. We would pull the data by zip code, but then that would be wrapped up into city. So the city data would be shown in a table. Every single city within the county would be able to see their information of active clients. And then I think to your last question around like, hey, what if I have a question about this data? Like what happens there? I think that would be really good feedback for our process of, okay, if we're getting this out, then we get some feedback in terms of questions. How do we respond to those? And I think we would definitely want to consider and try to respond to as many as possible based on the capacity of the Solari team, because likely it would be a request for them. And I don't want to hard commit to anything on their behalf at this time, but I know that we want to be as responsive as possible to people who are reviewing this data. We don't want it to just be well, this is it, like just take it or leave it. It's, yeah, if you do have questions that are going to support you in decision making, we absolutely want to try to give you as much information as possible.
All right, thank you.
Yeah. And so within that, here's like a basic timeline. So monthly, the dashboard is done by the 20th. So this board can see that and look at that anytime they please. That is something that is available and approved by you all to be available to the board, committees, subcommittees. At that point, HMIS will send some talking points to MAG, and we will internally review that. By the 22nd, we would send out to our COC stakeholders, hey, do you have any questions on this information? Do you have any things that you want a deep dive on? There would be 5 days to review that, and then Solari would have up to a couple of weeks to do deep dives into that data. So Chris, to your point, I think we have built in here, at least through the COC structure, that questions can be answered and deep dives can be made available based on the requests. Then what we're trying to produce is then quarterly, Solari would send agreed upon data points to MAG for inclusion in the synthesis. MAG would prepare the draft of the infographic. Solari would review that, and then MAG would share the feedback and deep dive information to the data subcommittee. Then we would present to the board. So basically, in terms of like very basics for you all, what this would look like quarterly. So for something that would be January to March, this would be presented to the board on the May meeting. So it would be roughly a month and a half behind, just to make sure all of the data is incorporated, but it would have all 3 months of data, narrative, deep dives incorporated, all of that stuff. So that's kind of what we would look like, and that's where the time frame kind of worked out. So any feedback on this process? I'll give it back to you, Madam Chair.
Thanks, TJ. I appreciate all the hard work on this. I can't wait to see an actual draft report. And just, Chris, as you were asking your questions, the idea here was absolutely to be transparent, but to do it without confusing people, because some of the data points and the sophistication now that we have with this systems, I'm sorry, I'm forgetting the name we have for it right now, but the flow, what did we call it, TJ?
System flow dashboard.
Systems flow dashboard, thank you. It's not, I don't want to say it's not user friendly, but if you are not in this world, you are not going to understand what you're looking at and why the numbers look the way they look. So we just didn't want reporters, public people who are interested to see things and not understand what they're looking at and draw uninformed conclusions. So we're just trying to figure out a way to make accurate data that everyone can understand together available. But I'm real excited about this information, so I hope that helps a little bit. Any other comments from the board? Okay, if not, oh, go ahead. Who was that?
Just excellent work. We've needed this for a long time, so fantastic. And thank you for giving us the opportunity to also provide feedback.
In terms of timeline, do you think we will be seeing a draft of an actual synopsis? When do we think that might happen?
Madam Chair, members of the board, based on this conversation, I have an internal meeting with our team and then with Solari, and I think we can get back to you with a specific time frame later this week.
Okay.
Because we didn't want to hard commit to anything based on the
Yeah.
feedback. If there was something, if there were dramatic changes that the board requested, that could impact a lot of that time frame. But overall, I think there wasn't a ton of feedback for this, at least in terms of dramatic changes. So I should be able to get back to you, but we should be able to at least give you templates and a draft of what it would look like by the next board meeting. Absolutely.
Wow, that's exciting. I'm excited. All right, it'll be early holiday gift. Okay, can I have a motion then to move forward with these data points in this process for the quarterly dashboard synopsis?
This is Chris, so moved.
Hi, Chris, thank you.
It's Eric, I'll second.
Thank you, Eric. So we have a first from Chris and a second from Eric. Did I get that right? Yeah. Is there any further discussion? All right, seeing and hearing none, I'll ask Katie to please take the roll.
Chair Balch,
Yes.
Eric Cole,
Yes.
Elizabeth DaCosta, Liz, I see you take yourself off mute, but we can't hear you. All right, we'll come back. Todd Gary,
Yes.
Chris Hallett,
Yes.
Liz, can you hear us now?
She might be having systems issues. Do we need the vote?
Yes, the vote would need to happen for quorum to happen. Otherwise, we can move this to our next meeting.
Okay, is it possible to move on to the next item and come back to a roll call for this vote again?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, perfect, thank you. All right, then we will move on. Was that Liz? No? Okay, we will move on to item number 9. Katie Gentry, Human Services Planner, will provide an update on the homelessness assets and needs data for unified planning, or the hand up tool, and making the tool public.
Thank you, Chair Balch. We have had multiple conversations internally and discussing with local and tribal governments about the use of this tool specifically for planning purposes, and more local and tribal governments have expressed interest in using this for planning purposes, but currently it's being password protected. And when we first reviewed this with people, there was some fears about people experiencing homelessness would use this tool, and we really wanted it to be password protected. And so we just wanted to get feedback on replacing that password protection with instead kind of a sorting tool that would push people who are there for planning purposes to enter, and then people who are there who are actually experiencing homelessness or looking for services to a different resource page that would be for those resources. So it would kind of dovetail to where you could get how to contact coordinated entry and how you would contact the campus, and tools that are really specific for somebody who is in that place versus for planning purposes. And so we just wanted to get you all's feedback on where, if that is something you all are okay with moving forward, or if you would rather keep it password protected, and what your thoughts are.
Thank you, Katie. Reactions from the board?
Quickly before I get reactions from the board, Liz, is that you who just joined us?
Yes, this is Liz. Sorry, I got disconnected. I'm back.
No worries. Thanks, Liz.
Okay. Reactions from the board on the hand up tool? So Katie, am I understanding correctly that the plan would be to go ahead and make it unprotected so that anyone can access it unless we have concerns?
That would be the recommendation from staff. We're also going to be gathering feedback from the committee and different subcommittees. So if they have any concerns about this, but wanting to bring it to you all forward as well.
So we've lost Jackie. I would love to hear from specifically shelter providers about if they have any concerns about location being publicized, something like that. I just don't know, but hopefully we can get that kind of feedback at the committee. Okay.
That would be the feedback we're looking for, yeah.
Okay, or municipalities, any, Chris, Marshall, oh, we've lost Marshall, right? Any concerns about how this information is represented publicly?
Nope. I would say in addition to the committee and subcommittees, we've also taken this to the regional coordination team and asked for feedback there as well. So we're just trying to get like the fullest picture of everybody that would potentially have concerns and how we can address those concerns, as well as make it most accessible for everybody who would potentially need it.
Okay. I am not hearing any. Oh, was that someone?
Yeah, sorry, this is Liz. I do think it's a really good point that you bring up, Ryan, about the shelter location. Because if we do send it out to the community, you know, folks like families in need of shelter may end up just showing up at certain places when there's not going to be able to, they're not going to be able to do an intake. So it's almost kind of further build out too. I have used it a little bit just in like some presentations for shelter expansion, and some of the feedback is that maybe it's still missing some of the resources in the area. So I think making the recommendation to the committee too, that we try to ensure that all of the service providers in those areas are also included. And then maybe we could even build out like a private feature where like there'll be something there, but it wouldn't like disclose address take, just something for us to think through. But it's fantastic too. Like Maggie is doing such an awesome job with data collection and the use of these tools when it comes to maps that have been very beneficial in talking to neighborhoods and business owners about shelter expansion. So yeah, thank you guys.
Along those same lines, I had an interesting request from a mapping firm, a big mapping firm that everybody would know the name of, who was working on actually something not from our state, but for another state. But I happen to have a personal connection there. And so they asked me if there was any mapping tools state to state for shelters. And the request was because this particular state that hired them needed to map out shelters, geography for shelters, because their new cannabis laws require a certain, I don't know what you'd call that, but spacing from shelters, that you couldn't have a dispensary. And so it was, you know, and they just thought I would be somebody who might have that information. So I thought about our thing and whether other states have things like that. And would we be, so another thought I would like us to think through is, can we provide it to people like that who are using it for policy purposes, you know, and then how would we vet, like, what are people using this information for? And how do we discern who we might provide that link to and who we might not to? And there's just a lot to think about there. So I'd say we probably do need to have some other discussion about it. And maybe, I don't know, maybe is there a way you guys could ask for feedback so that we could take our time and think about this and get it to you?
Ryan, real quick, you bring up a very good point, because when we're looking for shelter expansion, the dispensaries they have the same like zoning requirements as shelters. And so when the realtors are going out, it's like you're bumping up against the dispensary market, which is obviously has a lot of financial resources, versus like the homeless service provider market. And they're buying out a lot of the buildings. So we would need to be very cautious, I think, with actually giving that information out, just knowing that was their request. Interesting.
So I guess I would say, just from this discussion alone, we I personally would definitely want some more thought before we would do that. And maybe we need like a policy level team to sort of look at that and have all the considerations that might come up around this.
Thank you all. I think that was a really dynamic conversation.
Okay.
I don't know if this is allowed, so Amy St. Peter, please stop me. I received an email from a attendee. Can we share that comment now, or does that attendee want to raise their hand and say their comment? I'm not sure if I'm allowed to do that.
Thanks for checking in, Katie. Madam Chair, members of the board, it's fine for members of the public to be able to offer their comments at this time.
Great. Please turn it over to that member, Katie.
Hi,
read it
Amy
if-
Schwab and Linder, Human Services Campus.
Amy.
Your active community participant. I believe what I shared with Katie, I was just thinking of a streamlined way as to who would get access to this. And it seems to me if you're an HMIS user provider, you're entering data into HMIS, that would be the place to start for all the concerns you're all raising about sharing location. I think it would raise a lot more concern issue conflicts if it was open and not password protected at all. That's my 2 cents. Thank you.
And even and that's a great suggestion. And then along with that, I think we'd have to have some form of agreement for if we are going to allow it to everyone on HMIS, they'd have to, maybe it needs to be added to the HMIS agreement, or maybe it's a separate agreement that if you're accessing this portal, these are the rules and here's who can use it and because, you know, even just without malintent, somebody who has access to HMIS may get asked by somebody else, hey, do you know where all the stuff? Oh yeah, I have that information. Here it is, not knowing the security that's in place. Yeah.
Yeah, I can't speak for HMIS. I think that'd be relatively easy to update since if you're using it, you've already signed user agreements and confidentiality statements.
Yeah, I'm just not sure if it's HMIS's place to, like, we would use the same group as HMI of people who have access to HMIS, but I'm not sure if it's HMIS's place to have rules for HMIS users to apply to that. Like maybe it is. I just think we'd have to think through that as well.
And Madam Chair, members of the board, just to clarify as well, we're not listing anything on handout that isn't already publicly available. So we're not listing any confidential locations. All of this is already available through 211. There isn't data on there that isn't already being shared in a very public and accessible format. So we can certainly keep it password protected. We can offer different layers. We can do any number of different things, but it's already out there. So just want to make sure
it does make it so much easier to access though. Forgive me for saying, but I mean, putting a map out there that's available to anyone, like the example Liz came up with, if dispensaries are trying to, you know, get their geographic foothold, they can do that much more quickly than we can. Versus them knowing where to go look for that information and not having it, you know, nice and square and neat in a map. So I get technically it's already out there, but this would really be just making it very, very simple and easy and quick. Just a thought. I definitely think we need more discussion on this. All right. Anyone else before we move forward? Are we agreed that we need more discussion on this, Katie? Staff?
I believe that was the biggest takeaway. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right, moving on to number 10, updates. So just a note, there's been some discussion in terms of how to make agendas as streamlined and usable and for everybody. So in future meetings, we're going to be moving these updates by committee members, by subcommittees to the top of the agenda, just so that we're not delegating them to the end of the agenda every time, as you can see, we tend to lose people, and our focus might be waning. So we don't want that to happen. With that said, we also aren't going to require that any subcommittee present every time, but only if they have something new to present that they feel should be presented at our level that's not coming to us in another way. So just wanted to provide that update. If anybody has heartburn about that, please reach out to us. Otherwise, I think I sort of just took it on as something to address with staff. So with that, I'm going to start with an update from Coordinated Entry Subcommittee Chair Matthew Kelly.
Hi there. Hey, Ryan, I just want to start off by saying thanks for that. Because I've been sitting here for like an hour and I don't know, 20 minutes waiting. So thank you. But I only coming on to say that I don't have any significant updates to report, but my name was on the list. So I wanted to make sure that I at least made an appearance. So
case in point.
Yes.
No longer
however, I do intend to have some updates as of next meeting. So
appreciate it, Matthew.
Thank you.
Appreciate all the time and effort you've been putting in many, many ways.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, then next we're going to move on, and we are going to hear from Margaret Adams with the Corporation for Supportive Housing to provide additional information on the Supportive Housing Institute. Hello, my friend Margaret Adams.
Hi, it's so nice to see you.
I love seeing your beautiful face.
It's so nice to see you. Well, thanks so much for including us in your meeting today. We wanted to share just a little bit about our upcoming Supportive Housing Institute. So if Amy is still on the line, she can certainly give us some historical perspective about the Supportive Housing Institute and its ability to serve as a catalyst for developing new supportive housing units in our community. But we have shared with Katie our landing page for the Supportive Housing Institute. So we would love for that to go out to your networks just as a capacity building opportunity. So our applications are open now, and applications are due November 8th. And then we will notify the selected teams November 29th. And then the actual Institute sessions are going to launch likely at the beginning of 2022. And so we really are seeking teams that have a pretty well fleshed out, well developed idea for new supportive housing, not just in Maricopa County, but across the state. We're really excited that this Supportive Housing Institute has a health and housing focus. So we are prioritizing teams that are really focused on health partnerships. We have a couple of federally qualified health centers that are likely going to be participating in the Institute. So really excited about that. And the teams that, we're really looking for teams that include a developer, a property manager, and a supportive services provider. But certainly if, you've got a vision and maybe, or if you're aware of a project that has vision, but maybe doesn't have all of the team components in place, we would still love to hear from you, love to see an application. We'll be scoring those, between November 8th and the 29th. The selected teams, again, thanks to all of our wonderful funders who have brought this to the community. We're really excited that, it's free of charge to the teams that are the cohort that'll be selected. And then one other thing, that if there are teams that apply and aren't selected for this round, we are going to be offering an academy later in the year that won't be a competitive application process. So as that launches, there'll be some more capacity building opportunities in the community. So just wanted to share a little about that, and I'm happy to take any questions, and we can certainly share the landing page that includes the application and brochures and a lot of information, but also happy to take any questions.
Questions from the board? For those of you who don't know, well, I wanted to just take the academy, but Margaret said, well, you don't have anything to propose, so you're not ready. I was sad, but it's an awesome opportunity for people who do. So
yeah, we're really excited.
Yeah, really encourage everyone to contact Margaret if you think you have something exciting you would like to move forward. All right, thanks, Margaret. Okay, also, I believe that Michelle Jameson from our committee has an update. Is that right, Michelle?
I do, yes.
Awesome, thank you.
So, Madam Chair, basically our membership is open right now, so we're seeking new recruits. So if anybody's interested, please apply. The application will close on Friday, October 29th. We are also seeking 2 new co-chairs. And if they're interested in that, we will be, that's open till Friday, November 5th. And just members can send a resume and letter of intent to Katie. So other than that, that's basically anything new. We had similar presentations to what the board was presented to today. So that is it.
Great.
So thank you.
You're welcome. Michelle or Katie, could you just remind folks about the most appropriate persons to be on the committee in case anyone's thinking of applying? That would be helpful.
Sure. Do you want to approach that, Katie, or do you want me?
Sure, Madam
Okay,
Chair, members of the board, and Chair Jameson. It's anybody who is working in homelessness or involved with people experiencing homelessness. The board the committee had a wide array of seats that were open, including businesses, public housing authorities, and faith-based entities that they were looking to fill the seat. And there was also recommendations from the committee to have a public health involved, and then anybody else who feels like they should be at the table. And then they are focused on just kind of having a full voice. Michelle, did you?
And people can find the application on the MAG website, is that correct? Did you say that?
The application is not on the website. However, it was sent out, and I will get it added to our website, and there will be a reminder sent out today. But if you are having challenges finding it, please feel free to reach out to me and I will get it sent over to you.
Perfect. Thank you. And thank you for your leadership, Michelle.
Thank you. The only other thing that I do have to add is new recruits and new potential members. We do want to make sure that attendance is really followed and people attend. So if you don't have the time, you want to make sure you do have the time in order to meet the committee needs.
And what is the time requirement, Michelle?
It's just, well, you have some work groups if you want to be on to do some volunteers, but just it's a monthly commitment at the minimum.
Okay, good point. Thank you. All right, then we will move on to the next agenda item, which is request for future agenda items. Does any member of the board have any action or discussion items for future meetings?
Ryan, this is Liz. I think that we want, like, somewhere where we're going to discuss the implementation of technical assistance for our lower performing projects that we had just made that decision in rank and review on. I just want to make sure we get it somewhere so that we can take action on it. So if that's in the next board meeting, we want to discuss development of a work group, just get it somewhere.
Thank you. I'd like to add to that, it might be the same discussion is what is our approach to monitoring going to be? We've talked about monitoring for eons, and I'm not putting any specific definition on monitoring, but maybe it's desk monitoring, maybe it's cyclical visits, maybe not on a yearly, whatever it looks like. I'd like to, now that we have a more robust staffing structure, I'd like to rediscuss that. Were there others? Anyone else have their hand raised, Katie? No?
Not that I see.
Okay, then we'll move on to what I think is our final item. Okay, comments from the board. Is there anyone on the board that has announcements, events, other things you'd like to highlight? I have one I'll start with. I want to say happy birthday to Mr. Board Member Eric Cole. It is his birthday today. I think you should all shower him with greetings and phone calls and all those things. So very happy birthday, Eric. Is Eric gone?
Eric had to jump off the call. So
you should all text him, email him, call him. It's his birthday. All right. Any other announcements, events?
No announcement, but did we ever get Liz's vote on that dashboard?
Oh, thank you, Chris. Thank you, Liz. When you had a little bit of technical difficulty, we missed being able to do a vote. So if you wouldn't mind, we're gonna go back. And it was the vote on, let's see, I'm going back.
Flow
Was
dashboard.
It was the dashboard. What item number was that, Katie?
Item 8.
All right, item number 8. We had a motion on the table. Can you remind me who made the motion and who seconded?
Mr. Hallett moved to recommend the approval of the data points in process, and Mr. Cole seconded the motion. Chair Balch, Mr. Cole, Mr. Gary, and Mr. Hallett all voted in favor of the motion. And Mr. Costa, we missed your vote.
I'm in favor as well. Aye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Liz. Thank you, Chris. Saved
Thank you.
our rear region. Okay. All right. Anything else from the board or audience for that matter? Amy Schwabenlender, thank you for sticking with us. We appreciate your citizen representation. Tad, did you have something? Nope, you just happen to be up, it's up on my screen. All right. All right, then without further ado, thank you everyone for sticking with us through this long meeting. Lots of important things happened today. Staff, you did an excellent job of making sure we all got where we needed to be. So I'm going to adjourn this meeting. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate everyone's time. Have a great week. Hi. How are you?